My dear friends, tonight I want to hand you something the world has spent your whole life training you to refuse. Permission to believe in what you cannot see. Not cautious optimism. Not staying positive. Not managing your expectations while secretly hoping for the best. I mean faith. The kind that takes hold of a thing before a single visible fact supports it. The world has a word for a person who lives that way. It calls them unrealistic. There is a verse in the book of Hebrews that names this precisely. It says, "Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." Not a feeling about the thing, not a wish toward the thing. The substance of it, meaning the thing you are hoping for, already has a reality, already has a body, and the only door between its unseen state and its seen state is your willingness to take hold of it before your eyes agree. I know how that lands, because I have watched this word do real damage in people's lives. Unrealistic has been used to shame people out of trusting a healing that had not yet shown itself. It has been used to talk someone out of trusting a love that had not yet arrived, or a provision that had not yet landed, or a reconciliation the visible fact said was finished. It has been used again and again to keep people loyal to what already exists, instead of loyal to what is still becoming. And here is the truth I want to leave you with tonight. Every single person who ever received an answer to prayer, in the fullest sense of that word, was called unrealistic before they were ever called blessed. Let me put this in 3 places you already know something about, because Scripture always speaks through the ordinary, not the abstract. The man without money, who quietly trusted he was already provided for, unrealistic. The woman sitting alone, who quietly trusted she was already loved, cherished, chosen, unrealistic. The one still unproven in his calling, who quietly trusted the door was already open, unrealistic. Every one of them was operating on what their neighbors called foolishness, and every one of them, in time, watched that unseen substance harden into something the neighbors could finally see for themselves. That is not luck. That is the law working exactly as Scripture describes it. Faith is the substance, and substance, given enough time, always finds its way into form. So tonight, stop granting your eyes the final word. Stop treating "I'll believe it when I see it" as wisdom, when Scripture calls it precisely backward. Believe it, and then you will see it. That is the actual order the Gospel of Mark gives us. Whatsoever things you desire, when you pray, believe that you receive them, and you shall have them. Read the tense of that sentence carefully. Not believe you will eventually receive them, once conditions improve. Believe you receive them, now, in the present, while the visible world still shows you nothing. Let me show you what being realistic has actually been doing to you, because I don't think most people have ever looked at it directly. Realism asks you to grant final authority to whatever your senses currently report. Look at the bank balance, and let that be the whole truth about your provision. Look at the empty side of the bed, and let that be the whole truth about whether you're worthy of love. Look at how long you've been trying, and let that be the whole truth about whether the door is open. And while you were busy being reasonable in this way, you were unconsciously training your own household to keep producing the very report you didn't want. Every time you said, "Let's be realistic," you handed the visible world veto power over your future. Every time you said, "I have to deal with what's in front of me," you let a temporary report define a permanent identity. Every time you said, "I can't just believe something I haven't seen proof of," you rejected the one instrument, faith, that Scripture says is actually built for exactly that job. I want to be careful here, because this teaching is easily misunderstood, and I don't want you carrying the wrong version of it out of this room tonight. Faith in the unseen does not mean denying what is in front of you. It does not mean ignoring your bills, dismissing your doctor, or pretending your circumstances aren't real. Your eyes are not lying to you. They are simply reporting on what has already crossed over into visible form. And that is all they were ever equipped to do. They were never given the job of reporting on what is still forming, still unseen, still on its way. That job belongs to faith alone. You can know exactly what your bank balance says today without believing that number is the final ruling on your provision. You can know exactly how long the room has been quiet without believing that silence is the final ruling on whether you are loved. The facts remain facts. What faith refuses to do is let the facts deliver the verdict. This is where the real gap lives, not between seen and unseen as two competing camps fighting for control of your life, but as two witnesses giving testimony in the very same courtroom, where only one of them is qualified to speak about the future. Sight can only testify about yesterday. Faith is the only witness in the room who has ever been permitted to speak about what's coming. The world wants you to believe those two witnesses carry equal weight. They do not. Sight is always describing what has already happened. Faith is the substance of what has not yet happened, but already exists all the same. Let me tell you about a man I once knew, a professional in some difficulty with his position, who came to me certain the matter was finished. Every visible fact was against him. Nothing in his circumstances offered him a single reason for hope. I told him what I am telling you tonight. Stop consulting your eyes on this matter, because your eyes have no information about what has not yet taken shape. I asked him instead to sit quietly each evening and, in his imagination, feel the specific relief of the thing already resolved, not as a wish, but as an already accomplished fact, felt with the same ease you'd feel recalling something true about your own name. He told me plainly that this felt unrealistic. I told him he was right, and that this was exactly why it would work, because reality as his eyes currently reported it was never going to resolve the matter. Only a different substance, held on to faithfully, could do that. Within a matter of weeks, without any visible cause his previous facts could explain, the entire situation turned in his favor. This is what living in the end means, and I want you to understand it as a practice, not just an idea. You do not wait for the outer world to hand you a reason to feel relief. You take the relief that would only be justified afterward, and you claim it now, in advance, while the outer world still shows you nothing. If it is provision you are trusting for, you don't wait for the number to change before you feel secure. You assume the ease of already being provided for, tonight, before a single dollar has moved. If it is love you are trusting for, you don't wait for someone to prove it before you feel cherished. You assume the quiet certainty of already being chosen, tonight, regardless of who is or isn't in the room. If it is a calling, an opportunity, a healing, you don't wait for confirmation before you feel arrived. You assume the settled peace of someone who already has their answer, tonight, before the world has said a word. The mind will interrupt you here, and I want you prepared for it, because it interrupted every single person who has ever attempted this. It will say, "But this is dishonest. I don't actually have it yet. This is just pretending." That voice is not wisdom. That voice is simply sight, defending its jurisdiction, insisting it is the only witness allowed to testify. But sight was never asked to rule on this matter. Faith was always the one summoned for this. The substance of the thing hoped for does not require your eyes' permission to exist. It only requires your willingness to hold it, without apology, until it becomes something your eyes can finally confirm. Notice also what this practice is not. It is not gritting your teeth and forcing a smile you don't feel. It is not repeating a sentence you don't believe, hoping the repetition alone will do the work. It is a quiet, settled feeling, the same ordinary feeling you already carry, without any effort at all, about 100 things you've simply never questioned. You do not strain to believe your own name is your own name. You do not clench your fists and force yourself to feel certain about it. You simply rest in it, because somewhere along the way, it stopped being a belief you were maintaining and became a fact you were living from. That is the exact quality of feeling faith in the unseen is asking of you. Not effort, but rest. Not a performance aimed at convincing anyone, including yourself, but a quiet settling into something you have simply decided, once and completely, to no longer argue about. Here is a trap I want you to avoid at all costs, because it quietly disables this entire teaching for most people who attempt it. They trust for something small, because small feels safer to believe. A little more money instead of true provision. A slightly better connection instead of being deeply and completely loved. A modest improvement instead of the calling fully realized. They do this because a small assumption feels more realistic and therefore easier to sustain. But the law is not measuring how modest your request was. It is only measuring how faithfully you held the assumption, and for how long you were willing to hold it without needing the visible world to agree with you first. The effort required to trust a small thing and the effort required to trust a large thing are in practice nearly identical, because in both cases you are being asked to trust something your eyes cannot yet confirm. If you're going to exercise faith regardless, exercise it towards something worth arriving. Now let me return to what I said earlier about the two witnesses, because there is a further truth in it I want you to carry with you. Your senses are not merely limited. They are, by their very nature, always describing the past. When your eyes show you a low balance, they are reporting on a moment that has already occurred, not delivering a verdict on what's still forming. When your eyes show you an empty room, they are reporting on this present arrangement, not delivering a verdict on your worthiness to be loved. When your eyes show you a door that hasn't opened yet, they are reporting on today, not delivering a verdict on tomorrow. The senses report. They were never given the authority to define. The moment you hand them that authority, you have quietly agreed to live entirely inside yesterday, forever waiting for a report that, by definition, can never contain tomorrow's news. I received a letter once from a woman who applied this teaching to something quite small, and I share it because this law does not distinguish between small requests and great ones. It responds the same way to both. She wanted a particular parking space near her office, one that was almost never open. Each morning, before leaving her house, she held the feeling of arriving and finding it empty, waiting for her, exactly as though it had already been reserved. For nearly 2 weeks, nothing about the visible world cooperated. The space was taken every single morning. She told me she nearly gave up the practice more than once, because there was no evidence whatsoever to support what she was assuming. She held it anyway. On the 11th day, she turned into the lot, and there it was, open, waiting, exactly as she had already lived it 100 times in her imagination before her eyes ever confirmed it. Let me give you one more example, because I want this teaching grounded in something more than money. Since faith in the unseen touches every corner of a life, not just the financial corner. Some years ago, a woman wrote to tell me of a physical condition her doctors had been quite candid about. The outlook, by every visible measure, was not encouraging. She did not ignore her doctors. She kept every appointment, followed every instruction given to her. But each night, apart from all of that, she gave a portion of her evening to a single act. She imagined, in specific and ordinary detail, a conversation she fully expected to have one day with that same doctor, in which he expressed his own surprise at how completely she had recovered. She did not imagine dramatic scenes of illness lifting from her body. She imagined the small, almost bureaucratic moment afterward, a follow-up appointment, a clipboard, an ordinary exchange between two people, except that in this exchange the news was entirely good. She held that scene faithfully many nights in a row, long before her own body offered her a single reason to expect it. In time, the visible facts began, slowly, to agree with what she had already been holding as true. I do not tell you this to promise a particular outcome to anyone in a particular circumstance. That would not be honest, and this teaching was never meant to replace sound medical care. I tell you this because it shows the same law working in a different room of life. The unseen substance does not ask what kind of desire you bring it. It only asks whether you are willing to hold the assumption, faithfully, before the visible world has agreed to cooperate. This is the part of the teaching where most people quietly fail, and I want to name it plainly, so you recognize it when it comes for you. It is easy to hold an assumption for a single quiet evening, with nothing pressing against it. It is an entirely different matter to hold that same assumption the next morning, when the bill arrives anyway, or the phone stays silent anyway, or the old symptom returns anyway. This is exactly where people mistake the return of old evidence for proof that their faith has failed, when it only ever proves the outer world has not yet caught up, which was always going to be true for a time, in every case where this law has ever worked at all. The instruction is not to be surprised when sight speaks up again. The instruction is what you do with your attention the moment it does. Do you let its report become the final verdict, or do you gently return, as many times as it takes, to the substance you have already decided to trust? Understand also that you will not be the only one asked to hold your nerve here. The people around you will notice, sooner or later, that you have stopped waiting for their kind of proof. Family will grow uneasy. Friends may roll their eyes. Someone who loves you, in their own way, will say, "You need to be realistic about this," meaning quite plainly that your certainty is making their own uncertainty harder to sit with. Let them say it. Their discomfort is not evidence against you. It is only evidence of which witness they've chosen to trust. They will tell you they only want to protect you from disappointment. They will tell you that hope is fine, but you have to live in the real world. They will remind you, gently or not so gently, of every time something like this has not worked out before, for you or for someone they knew. Hear all of it and understand that none of it is actually a judgment about whether your faith is well placed. It is simply a report from someone who has decided, consciously or not, to grant final authority to sight rather than to faith. And they are only offering you the same terms they have already accepted for themselves. Every person alive is trusting something they cannot see. The pessimist trusts, with real devotion, that tomorrow will disappoint the way yesterday did. That is faith too, simply aimed at a lesser outcome. And society approves of it, precisely because it asks nothing daring of anyone. Nobody is ever called unrealistic for assuming things will stay hard. Nobody is ever pulled aside and warned to be careful about expecting disappointment. That particular unseen conviction is allowed to pass without challenge every single day in nearly every household. It is only the hopeful assumption that gets stopped at the door and asked for its papers. You are not being asked to abandon faith because you were never without it. You are only being asked to choose, deliberately, and for the first time perhaps, what you place it in. There are 2 moments each day when this practice does its deepest work. And I want to give you the actual method before we close tonight, because I never want to leave you with a principle and no way to use it. The first is the moment just before sleep. The second is the moment just after waking, before the day has had a chance to speak first. These are threshold moments, when the reasoning mind has quieted and the deeper mind is most receptive to whatever state you hand it. Before sleep, choose one specific thing you are trusting toward. Not a vague improvement, but one clear state, one clear outcome. Then build a small, ordinary scene in your imagination that could only be happening if that thing were already true. Not a grand production, something quiet and specific. If it is provision, perhaps the small, unremarkable moment of checking your account and feeling nothing but calm familiarity. If it is love, perhaps an ordinary evening, and a particular sentence only someone who already loved you would say. Enter that scene from the inside, not as someone watching it happen to another person. Feel what you would feel if it were true. Let that feeling, and not the day's disappointments, be the last thing your mind carries into the night. Because whatever state you fall asleep in is the state your deeper mind continues working with, undisturbed, until morning. Then, upon waking, before the phone, before the day's first report reaches you, return to that same state for just a few minutes. Let it be the first thing you are, before the visible world has had a chance to remind you of what it currently shows. Do this consistently, and you will begin to notice something. The shift, when it comes, rarely announces itself loudly. It tends to arrive first in small, almost forgettable ways. An unexpected message, a door opening you hadn't accounted for, someone saying exactly the thing you needed to hear, seemingly by accident. These are not coincidences. They are the unseen substance beginning to cross over into visible form, the way a seed pushes the first quiet inch of a shoot up through soil, long before anyone standing above ground has any reason to expect a harvest. Most people miss these early signs entirely, because they are watching for something enormous and undeniable. Watch instead for the small ones. And when you see them, do not relax your faith too soon. That is precisely where many people lose the very momentum that was about to complete itself. The full harvest is still forming, out of sight, and it asks you to remain faithful all the way through, not merely until the first hint of proof arrives. So here is where I want to leave you tonight, with perhaps the most demanding instruction I could give you, and also the simplest. Choose the one thing you have been waiting to see before you would allow yourself to believe it. And tonight, reverse the order. Believe it first. If it is provision, lie down as someone who has already been provided for. Not someday, but now, tonight, in this room, regardless of what the account currently shows. Feel the particular ease of a person who no longer has to strain over money, the quiet loosening in the chest that comes from knowing, not hoping, that there is enough. If it is love, lie down as someone already cherished, already chosen, already known completely by another person, and not found wanting. Carry that quiet certainty into sleep, the way you would carry something you already know to be true about your own name. Not something you're still trying to convince yourself of, but something settled. If it is a calling not yet realized, a piece of work not yet recognized, close your eyes tonight the way you would close them the evening after the good news has already arrived. The striving finished, the waiting over, nothing left to prove to anyone, least of all